Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Rotten Reviews. On this episode, I take a look at the 2019 film Doom Annihilation. It has a big 16% on the audience score and does not even have a rating on the tomato meter. Now, the reason why it isn't on the tomato meter is because no actual Rotten Tomatoes approved critics have chosen to write a review on it. This isn't too surprising. This was just released straight to Netflix in the past, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks, I suppose. In any case, 16% on the audience score. It has a big, gigantic, whopping 85 user reviews. This may go up over time as people end up clicking on this on Netflix. Now, right off the bat, I'm going to say this is certainly a B movie. It was never advertised as anything other than a B movie, straight to video, straight to Netflix. Having said that, I surprisingly enjoyed this more than I did the 2005 movie with Dwayne Johnson, or The Rock, if you will. Why? I guess it's just because this was far more faithful to the actual video game Doom, the original Doom by ID Software from back in the 90s. This has a lot of callbacks to that. It feels much more like something from that video game universe. You can tell that the producer or the director of this, or whoever was involved in crafting this, actually took care to make it feel like it belonged in that old Doom franchise, and it worked. The movie with The Rock, it was a complete abomination as far as being faithful to the video game. Yes, it was a bigger Hollywood production. Yes, it had bigger stars, but it had flaws just like this B movie has. In fact, it had actually more offensive flaws as a Hollywood production versus this movie, because this movie just straight up is a B movie and it doesn't claim to be anything more than that. Whereas the Hollywood version from 2005, it misleads you into thinking it's going to be much better than it is, and the actual logical fails in this B movie adaptation from 2019 are far less egregious than the actual logical fails in the 2005 Hollywood movie. Really, they are, and this is far more enjoyable. Now, I'm not saying this is a good movie. I'm not saying that it doesn't deserve to be rotten. This is clearly rotten, but it was designed to be rotten. No deception involved here. I went into this with an open mind, and I actually enjoyed this, and I sat through the whole thing, and I enjoyed it more than I did that 2005 film. Now, having said that, obviously, you know, maybe no critic will probably review this, no Rotten Tomatoes approved critic at least, and maybe even if the audience score, even if there aren't more than 100 more user ratings on it, I could say that 16%, it could be 20%, it could be 25%. Anywhere between 16 and 25 would still be fair. This is certainly still rotten, but if you want something that's actually attempting to seriously capture the aesthetic from the 90s Doom game, then this is the one, not the 2005. Now, having said that, again, it's rotten, and this is straight B-movie stuff, but it's no more worse than anything on the Sci-Fi Channel. It's better than a lot of stuff that's gone straight to the Sci-Fi Channel. The production values better, although it does have some rather bland and bad acting on the part of two particular stars, but not all of the acting is bad. Some of it's quite passable until well on into more than halfway through the film, where you start to see some of the acting flaws, and there's some kind of weird logic, almost like a bad AI to the video game demons. But then again, that's no worse than what the video game does. This feels very much like a video game. It's no better or worse than the drama that would be found in a video game. So if you go into this with that frame of mind, you'll watch this whole thing. And I was actually impressed by how good, how much money was actually put into the budget to portray the hell dimension. And at the end, you see the hell dimension, and it's very video game-like. No better or worse than a video game, but it's actually better than what I got out of the 2005 film. It is better, as strange as that sounds. Even when I talk about it, it sounds strange for me to say this is a better movie than that 2005 film, but it is actually a better movie, and that's more on saying how bad that 2005 film is, more than saying this one is very good. But let's get into the audience reviews. There aren't very many, so I'm going to go through all of them as time permits. And I made a few notes, not very many, but this is a B movie, so you can nitpick this all day long, but let's just get right into the reviews. We have one from 3 hours ago, 4.5 stars. They used the BFG more than once, showed more than 2 types of monsters, and one of the monsters actually shot out red energy balls just like in the game. Also, how the BFG and the red card get lifted in the right spot for Doom Guy to pick it up. It was good, you should see it, but the whole thing about letting the terrorists go was dumb. Well, I'll agree. This is not any 4 stars, 4.5 stars. Let's not be ridiculous. I'll assign like 1 star to this whole thing because I actually sat through it all and I was impressed enough to watch the whole thing. I thought that it would be so bad that I would just shut it off after 20 minutes or laugh out loud at it the whole way. But no, it's actually quite passable. A lot of it's quite passable. If you accept it as a B movie, it's 1 star. Certainly it's worth watching just one time if you're certainly if you're a fan of the original 90s Doom video game franchise. I can't speak for the more modern Bethesda version of Doom, but this one is like straight up taken from the original game. 1 star, certainly. Now, as far as the BFG weapon goes, now anybody that knows about the original Doom game knew that the problem with that BFG weapon is that you don't get it till the very end of the game and you use it on the boss. In the game, it's basically a boss weapon, and it produces more of a gigantic nuclear explosion than just singeing or destroying a single target. So that wasn't very accurate, but the look of it was very accurate. The one thing that was really bad plot-wise about the BFG versus the video game is that the BFG weapon in this movie is shown to be fired multiple times without any kind of reloading or recharging, and I think it was like a 1 or 2 shot weapon at most in the original game. You shot this thing once and had to reload it, but it would drop a nuke on everybody, so to speak. Now they didn't get that right in this movie, probably for movie reasons, so the Doom hero of this movie actually fires it multiple times. So that's not accurate to the video game. And for anybody that's not familiar with the original game, BFG stands for what you think it might. It stands for Big Effing Gun, and it could have been better. It's plastic. All the weapons in this movie are plastic. They're pretty faithful to the original video game, but they should have, particularly in the BFG weapon, since it's so big compared to the person wielding it, as it is in the video game, they should have put some kind of weight into it. They could have put weight inside that plastic so that it looked more realistic when it was being hefted around. Otherwise, it was pretty faithful to the video game. It was just a little bit too light and plastic looking, but it was passable. 1 star, 16 hours ago. This was just dumb and stupid. Try again, you idiots. Well, the original game is dumb and stupid. The original game, it was the first 3D first-person shooter type of game that was out on the PC. Maybe Wolfenstein was the first, but actually this was actually the first one that had a fluid 3D environment without using a lot of 2D sprites, and it had like the gun perspective and whatnot that you would see in a modern game. This was largely, you could consider Doom to be the first 3D shooter, and the positive thing about it was back in the day we were running 386 and 486 computers. A 486 by Intel with a 33 megahertz processor was the newest, most high-tech computer back in the day, and yet this ran on it just fine. It installed off of 3 floppy disks, 3 1.44 megabyte floppy disks, and you didn't need some special video card. It ran on a standard 386 or 486 computer with no special video card for graphics installed. Now, you can say that games have improved a lot, but you know what? Video game plot logic hasn't improved that much, and so this movie You can say the plot is stupid, sure, but it's no more stupid than video game plots are, and video games with 5-star reviews, no less. So let's move on. 3 stars, 16 hours ago. Has potential, but understandable due to the budget. At least it didn't hire some actor to ruin the story. Could have added some more familiar faces. Hell, Knight, Pinky. Yeah, they're saying that they would have preferred to have more recognizable actors, but I disagree. I think that the reason this isn't completely unwatchable is because they used actors that I didn't recognize, and so my expectations weren't high. And you go into this expecting a B movie, and that's what you get. In a B movie, you don't get like big name brand actors. You get unknown actors, and that's what it gave you. And I respect that. I think this would have been worse and more unwatchable if it had had The Rock or somebody else like that in it. You would have been expecting far too much. No, it did a good job giving you actors and actresses that weren't completely rotten, but were kind of unknown and had their issues, and that fit right in with the B movie feel to the movie. And I'll say another thing. While I'm on the subject of B movie quality, this had quite good visuals for something that went straight to Netflix or should have gone straight to Sci-Fi Channel. It had actually better graphics, better visuals and effects than a lot of movies I've seen that do that. In fact, the actual spaceships and the models used and the look of it, the interior design of the base on the Phobos asteroid, they actually looked pretty damn good for a B movie. Most B movies look like shit all the way through. This one didn't. This one was actually good enough for me to actually suspend some disbelief and get into it, as strange as that is. Half a star from 18 hours ago. Another whack at the cash cow from an iconic video game institution. Terrible acting, inaccurate lore, and a generic narrative. This is a straight-to-DVD bin at Walmart for $3.99. Yeah, it's actually straight to Netflix, I believe. You know, what can you expect? It's not actually, this is not actually a cash grab from the video game franchise. The video game franchise, ID Software in particular, has stated on multiple occasions that they had nothing to do with this film. So it's rather surprising and unexpected, but in a good way, that while I watched this movie, I found that it had a lot of callbacks and whatnot to ID Software's Doom. It even had one of the Doctor characters called Dr. John Carmack, and Carmack is actually one of the developers of Doom. There's a lot of callbacks, and they designed, for example, the key cards in this film were designed to look very much like the original key cards from the video game. A lot of it was above and beyond what I was expecting from something that had been disavowed by ID Software. They did a good job at making it feel like the original Doom, and this had nothing to do with ID Software. So don't say that it's a video game cash grab, because it's definitely not, at least not on the part of the video game software companies. It's certainly not. 2 stars, 2 days ago. Doom Trooper isn't a woman. Yeah, there's been a lot of negative press about the fact that the actual protagonist that fights the demons is a woman. I didn't find that to be a problem. I mean, I found it more of a problem to have Dwayne Johnson as this character and then have him totally nonsensically characterized and have him transform into a villain for no reason at halfway through the film. You know, the 2005 film, its biggest flaw is the fact that The Rock had such a bad performance and an illogical performance in it, and he didn't do the Doom Trooper any favors by starring as the main character. This no-name female actor actually did a better job. It actually worked better in the film, and I appreciated it for that. She wasn't overly attractive on top of it. You know, a straight-up video game cash grab, it would have been making the female protagonist character like overly sexualized and attractive. It didn't do that. It made her just like a regular-looking girl that might be in that situation, that might be somewhat military. So I didn't find that bad at all. I thought it worked quite well. A Hollywood version in 2005 would have had, a pinup Playboy model as your Doom Trooper. I guarantee you it would have been a lot worse than this. So this isn't bad at all. 3.5 stars from 2 days ago. Honestly, it's not a bad film. Decent enough acting, and considering the budget for this film, it's fairly impressive. Hell of a lot better than the movie with Carl Urban and The Rock. At least this film actually mentions hell. Yeah, Carl Urban and The Rock, That movie was worse on a lot of different levels. Yes, it had the budget. Yes, it had recognizable actors and actresses, but none of them made the movie better. This one actually did better with no-name, generic actors and actresses that I've never seen before. They weren't offensive in any way. The film was a B movie, but the actors and actresses felt like they belonged in a B movie. It worked. It worked in a lot more ways than the original film. I found it highly more enjoyable, but not 3.5 stars. That's a bit overkill. 1 star because, come on, it's still a B movie. I can't give it more than 1 star. 3.5 stars 2 days ago. Look, it's a low-budget B movie for sure. Far from perfect. However, for a Doom fan who was burned by the 2005 movie, where they changed the antagonist from hell to genetic experiments gone wrong, it made me happy. I grew up with the game and it means a lot to me. This movie, while flawed, at least stuck to what made Doom what it is, a fight with hell and all its horror. I hope they make a sequel. I would definitely watch it. At least I can hope to see the cyber demon in this Doom movie. Yeah, I kind of agree with that as somebody that was like 22 or 23 when Doom became a big video game back in the 90s. This was very good. It was a very nice callback to it. It was far better. It worked for me much better than that movie with The Rock and Carl Urban. Guaranteed, and I agree with that part. But I don't agree with 3.5 stars. This is still 1 star. 2.5 stars 2 days ago. So terrible, it's actually amazing. It's amazing that a movie with such a low budget looked so good. The spaceships looked good. The interiors looked good. The creature effects actually didn't look bad, despite having bad logic on the way they attacked. They still looked pretty good, and it was actually nice to see one of the demons actually project its energy, just like it did in the video game. Although it looks a little weird in a movie to do that, it was actually accurate to the way the video game was, how the cyber demon attacked with its energy ball, and it was interesting that they actually made it authentic. They didn't try to make it look better for the sake of the film. They just straight up made it authentic to the video game. I appreciated that, and actually, it wasn't cringeworthy bad. The creature effects, while they became a little bit boring, just seeing waves of them come at the protagonists, it was no worse than what a video game would do, and it wasn't cringeworthy bad. It was simply B-movie acceptable bad. I didn't feel any moment of cringe while watching this, while if I watched that 2005 version with Carl Urban and The Rock, I'll actually cringe at a lot of it. So it's B-movie bad, but not offensive or cringeworthy bad. 2 stars from 2 days ago. Better than I thought it was going to be. Several holy crap moments, like the handgun with the endless magazine that is somehow more effective than the large machine gun. Yeah, there's kind of, again, there's like no actual logic to the way the weapons work against the demons in this film, but it does match the video game. In the video game, you can have like what should be a more powerful weapon dispatch an enemy, and have what should be a weaker gun, but have it more effectively dispatch the enemy in a different circumstance with a different number of shots. Again, this is no worse than what you see in a video game. In fact, it's not just no worse than what you saw in the original Doom. It's no worse than what you see in a lot of video games today with their video game weapons logic. It's very much just like this movie in a hell of a lot of video games made to this day. Half a star 2 days ago. Another Mary Sue story. CGI wasn't terrible most of the time. Story was bland and repeated. Save your time. Yeah, we'll save your time if you don't know anything about the original game from the 90s. But if you're about my age and you enjoyed that game, you're going to appreciate this. But don't expect more than a B movie, and you won't be offended. Half a star. Worst movie I've seen all 2019. Do not waste your time like I did. Maybe you haven't seen some more newer movies in 2019, like, for example, the new Cats movie. I'll bet you'll like that a lot less than this, and its budget is wow, orders of magnitude higher than this one. So don't say this is the worst of 2019. It's not even the worst B movie of 2019. There are far worse B movies than this one. So I don't agree on that, but half a star. It could be half a star. A movie was made and people got paid, but I give it more than that. I give it a solid 1 star because it actually attempted to be accurate to the video game for the most part. Half a star. Movie Doom, not good at all. Could not watch it after 30 minutes into it because the characters are trained Marines and they could not perform like how Marines who are trained should. They broke rank, didn't know how to use their guns or tactics. Yeah, and all of that's just like what you would see in a video game from a B movie in particular. So, no, this is not an accurate World War II simulator. It's not supposed to be a modern military drama. This is a video game movie, and it's a B movie, and in that regard, there's nothing cringeworthy going on here. Half a star 3 days ago. The story didn't follow a series line at any point, and maybe only vaguely. Casting made it seem like anyone off the street was casted. The fights were all cut always because no, we can't get a clear picture. Definitely a E-rated movie. Should just be deleted from existence. No, I disagree. It's solid B movie material, especially for a video game adaptation. Yeah, they cast people that are largely unknown that I don't think I've seen anywhere before, and I thought that worked in the movie's favor because if you had put even one familiar face in this, it would have made the movie worse because this is a B movie. It's not pretending to be anything else. Half a star. Movie is absolute trash. It amazes me stuff like this is even allowed to finish production. Not even worth a watch if you have nothing to do. I disagree. It's worth watching if you're my age and you're a fan of the original video game. It's worth seeing this one time. It's certainly not, something to watch over like, I don't know, reruns of The Office on Netflix or something. There's more enjoyment there. But for what it is, this movie is quite effective. 1 star 3 days ago. The movie was clearly feminist-driven and non-realistic, like how she managed to pick up the BFG, which is massive gun as a small, not even somewhat strong-looking woman in size, and even swam with it. Well, yeah, this is a video game. And did you know that whether you're a gigantic muscled action hero or whether you're a 12-year-old schoolgirl, if you get on your computer keyboard and you have a mouse in one hand and the keys on the other hand, and you start up a copy of Doom, no matter which version you're playing, you're as equally skilled. It doesn't. This is video game logic. This is a video game movie, so it still fits because in a video game world, it's not the size of your body that matters, it's your skill. But again, I didn't find that offensive in any way. This is a video game story. It's no, and if you want to find something more offensive on that same regard, why don't you look at the Tomb Raider movies with Angelina Jolie? Yeah, that's worse because those movies, they're video game movies as well, but they show even more improbable things from what is supposed to be an action hero of physical stature in Tomb Raider. But again, these are video game movies. This one is far less offensive than, for example, Tomb Raider 1 or 2 of those movies were to the video game. No, there's nothing in here video game adaptation-wise that's offensive and like feminist-driven. There's nothing in here that's feminist-driven. So people that find things in that, they're looking to find something in everything, I guess. So let's move on. The gun itself was 3/4 of her body and was made out of steel or metal. It amazes me how someone could actually think this movie was good, and the male characters dropped like flies and couldn't even come close to fighting a demon in hand-to-hand combat, as well as female in the movie. Yeah, but you know what? Guess what? In video games, there is no logic along these lines. For example, inventory. How do you swap between all these inventory weapons? Like, for example, even in what is supposed to be a more realistic military shooter like a Call of Duty, you have weapons on hotkey. You have inventories, and you can just push a button, and all of a sudden that weapon's in your hands. Well, that's not the way it works in the real world in any kind of combat scenario. All video games dispense with logic to one degree or another, and people accept it just fine. So if you're adapting a video game and you're having people carry around all these different weapons, you could actually just have these weapons materialize into their hands if you wanted to, because it would be faithful to the video game. So it all depends on where you want to draw your logic and your suspension of disbelief. But in the case of this movie, it didn't do anything that was out of line. If it did, I would mention it. Weapons didn't materialize into people's hands. They were actually carried around. But yes, I will acknowledge that that BFG gun, it needed to have some kind of weight added to the prop so that it looked more realistic carrying it around. But again, that's not a thing in Doom. You're shown in Doom just carrying weapons around. There's no real gravity to anything, just enough gravity to hold you to the floor, I suppose. Let's continue on. The gun itself was, yeah, and the male characters dropped like flies and couldn't even close to fight. Yeah, this movie had kind of demon characters that kind of fought in a really weird, logical way, and that's what you would see in Doom. Especially the earlier Doom games. You would even have enemies that couldn't follow you around certain corridors, or they would just stop and stand there. This is video game type AI, and you saw that kind of AI a little bit in the movie. I didn't find it offensively bad. I found it actually, it worked as more of a callback to the way those demons in Doom would fight you. There's not a lot of real world logic to it. It's a video game. 2 stars, December 18, 2019. We're back 1 year from the point of this recording of this video. Not English, but half a star. This is one of the worst pieces of film trash ever. I saw 15 minutes of it and that was enough. Yeah, it's not going to be an accurate representation of what would happen if people went and fought demons on a moon of Mars. This is straight up what you would see in the video game Doom, and it did a good job of that. Half a star, November 18, 2019. I wish they did not use the name Doom, as the original Doom movie was awesome with great actors and was a great production. This Doom Annihilation was an effort to watch with poor acting and a real B-grade production. I was looking forward to another Doom movie and was left extremely sad. Did I say we were back in 2018? I don't know why I said that. I must have gotten confused. We're in 2019. We have to be because this movie wasn't released in 2018. So let me just restate. We were in currently in November 10th, 2019 on the review that I'm reading now. 2 stars. Doom Annihilation passed the time just fine, but it was pretty plain for an alien threat in space. One character acknowledges it's like aliens, which it is. The first 20 minutes are a group of scientists repeatedly making the same stupid decisions, but then the action kicks off after that. The actors take their roles so seriously, they earned the movie a whole star and a half as far as I'm concerned. Not a good one, but it does have popcorn fun. Yeah, I'll largely agree with that review, but I say just 1 star. But I guess if you're a super fan of Doom, you could give it 2 stars, but I'm sticking with 1 star on this. You know, I don't think we're ever going to get critics' reviews of this. They probably wouldn't bother. But just have the audience score serve as your critics' reviews. I mean, really, that's all that counts. That's why I do rotten reviews, because I think only the audience score matters. Not necessarily only the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, but only the audience's opinion on movies matters in the end. They're the ones that pay the ticket price. They're the ones that buy it or rent it. They're the ones that keep movies being made. The critics don't. So anyway, I did have some small lists of things. Yeah, I'll say that I thought it was a little bit disappointing that this movie, we were about 36 minutes into it before we actually encountered any actual demons, any actual battles with the demons started. So that was a little slow. It could have picked up the pace on that a little bit. At times, there was a little bit too much talking. You know, when the action did have a pause, there was a little bit too much talking going on between the characters in an attempt to maybe characterize them a little bit, but we didn't need all of that. It was a little bit unnecessary. The head scientist, who turns out to be the big villain in the end of this, he knows a little bit too much about the protagonist. It's like he's done a whole lot of research on the protagonist, and there's no reason why he would have done all that research so early on in the film, and he clearly did. So that's a little bit of a logic fail, but it's just a minor one. Yeah, there's one big logical plot fail here. The only one that really stuck out to me on a B movie level even is that At one point, the protagonists, they go into the reactor core of this base, and when they get in there and defeat some demons and actually reactivate the reactor core and get the power turned on to the base, they could have actually prevented all the other bad stuff that happened, the big bad threat, from getting to Earth by actually just shutting the reactors back off again instead of leaving them on and continuing on. When they found out what the villain's plan was, who he was, and what his plan was, they could have just shut the reactors off again. They were in a position to do so, but they didn't. Instead, they chose to leave that on and let him carry out his plan. And that was the only main logical fail, but it had to be there, I guess, to get the plot to continue. Yeah, it's got B-movie silly acting and dialogue, particularly after we get into our demon battles. It gets a little silly, but this is a B-movie, so it's not cringeworthy to me because I was expecting to see more really bad dialogue and acting right from the get-go, and I didn't see that. It was about 40 minutes into this before it got kind of cheesy in some scenes and some of the bad acting shown through, and I was pleasantly surprised that such a minor amount of it, showed up. I thought I would get a lot more of it. I thought I was going to cringe and shut this off after a few minutes, but I was pleasantly surprised overall. The BFG, I mentioned it before, for its incredible size, it needed to have more weight added to the prop, and that would have been a very simple thing. They could have just put some kind of metal weight inside of the prop. That's just real basic movie prop type stuff that somebody should have known better. But they didn't, and as a result, it kind of looked a little bit fake, this small female character swinging it around. It was so easily fixed, they should have. Yeah, the final note I have on my notes is that this is actually better than the 2005 version. I'm sorry, it just is. It's less cringeworthy. It didn't need a bunch of big names to do what it did. It was a far better nod and far better, salute to the original video game, despite not having anything to do with the producers of the video game. They had no role in this in any capacity. Yet this came off better to me. It felt better and less cringy than the 2005 version. I think it's superior. It's superior, and it's kind of funny, showing you how low Hollywood really sinks, that you can have a big budget 2005 Hollywood film be outclassed in a lot of ways by a simple B movie. That shows you just how low Hollywood is, and the 2005 movie with The Rock is a straight-up cash grab, no question about it. This one I don't regard like that. This one I think is perfectly acceptable as a B movie on the Sci-Fi Channel or even on Netflix, and so I have to come away from this with a largely positive view of it, and I don't have that positive view of the 2005 film. So there you have it, and I'm going to cut this one off, call it a wrap. Agree with the 16% audience score, but in a good way, and I will see you on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.